start collecting some figures on how to analyze countries in comparison, more deeper view on, or more detailed view on these internationalization steps, and then again cross-border trading with export processes. Third day, trade agreements, product management on a global level. Do we extend our standard portfolio, or do we adapt it to localize it to countries, yes or no? And the last topic is culture, including wrap-up. Today, introduction and basics, then dedicated expansion strategies, and then some special effects on the third day. I've been also asked last week from your teachers, can you share some thoughts on technical trends in the future from the perspective of Germany? I would like to do this, but I would postpone it to the third day, because now I want to start into that session right now. And at first, days ago, I sent you an invitation to a survey, and now we have a look what you have written to me. Do you see this results from the survey?
Yes, Prof.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Clear.
So 13 from your side participated on the survey, and I sent you 4 questions just to find out where you are, from what kind of point you start into that seminar, and it was interesting for me. So a couple of you have some knowledge about countries besides Indonesia. Ingress, I had to go to Google the translation for Ingress. Ingress is the Indonesian name for Great Britain, right? Or United Kingdom, England.
Yeah.
Someone wrote South Korea, Korean, Germany, interesting. Someone has knowledge about US and Japan, and someone is, I would say, cosmopolitan. Japan, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Singapore, Brunei, Mesir. This is Turkey, right, Mesir?
Yes.
Turkey.
No, Egypt.
Yeah, Egypt. Yeah. Interesting. Having know-how about other countries is a prerequisite. And I have to say, I've never been in Saudi Arabia. I've never been in Malaysia or in Singapore. Perhaps this one can bring some additional things and topics to us in our session. And once again, USA, Malaysia, the US, Korea, and Japan. This is understandable because it's the Asian region, and South Korea, I've heard, is a country where you share student offerings. And interesting, a couple of you, or the majority of your side, is interested in a job in the near future. Let me say the following. When I was in your age, it was in the 80s. Internationalization, globalization, yeah, this came up at the time, but to do business on a global level was, for us, for me, far away. For your generation, it is clear. You have to face these things during your study and during your working time. Sooner or later, global things come onto your desk, and use your study time to have a look on these topics there, and these people here that have said, yeah, could be that I'm interested in such a job, or 5 say definitely I'm highly interested. Sooner or later, for everybody in your generation, your age, this will be part of your working life. What are the biggest hurdles? Interesting feedback also, and what you have written, absolutely correct. The ability, the mindset you have to have as a prerequisite. Currency, language, and cultural difference are definitely the hurdles. And interesting what someone wrote here. Culture and technology are one of the biggest hurdles for international business. Good to read this here, and this demonstrates to me you are coming from the from a technology faculty, but you are also aware what is important for us running a business on a global level. Different business environment, cultures, again, tax, budget, language, yeah, the intention from the lecture today is to overcome these type of hurdles. And the last question was, is there a specific topic, do's and don'ts when building a culinary business? Culinary business, I have to say I'm not the best expert on that. But perhaps the seminar will also touch these things that are important for you, for the one who wrote this here. Business strategy, yeah, this is definitely part of our lecture. How technology affects international business, I will catch this up at the end of the seminar with this technical trends from a perspective of Germany. I want to hear about the company or employer work in Germany. Yes, I come to that point on the second day. Compete in the 4.0 revolution area, not dedicated question or part from my seminar. And 4.0 is an expression about, or a term covering the new technologies used in industrial engineering. And yeah, I was aware that you come from the computer science, from chemistry, and from electrical engineering. So I tried to put some examples from that into the slides. How to manage global teams. This is something that I can't put into these 3 days. We have only 3 sessions, and how to manage people in a foreign country would be too much for me. But perhaps I touched this a little bit. And once again, thank you for this feedback. This shows to me you are more ahead on thoughts about global business than I expected. Back to my slides. Yeah, now we start definitely. We're coming to the first topic of today, causes and effects of progress globalization. I've picked up a short movie. This takes 5 to 6 minutes, and afterwards I come back to the main important things that you see later on in that movie. At first, globalization is a term, a wording that came up in the early 80s. And globalization has an influence on three main topics. It has influence on the economy, on the culture, and on the politics, besides the environment. And there were two American researchers who introduced that term, globalization. At first, Theodore Levitt, a professor from the Harvard Business School, he mentioned the first time in an article in Harvard Business Review. Harvard Business Review is a newspaper or a magazine published by the Harvard School on a regular basis. And he wrote the first time the globalization of markets. And this was besides the publishing from John Nesbitt, also an American researcher. He is a future trend researcher from the US, or was it? And he wrote the book Megatrends and analyzed the globalization of companies coming from the automotive industry. The automotive industry was the first one that scaled up their business with internationalization. Look at Toyota, look at Ford, the American one, later on the some German automotive producers. So John Nesbitt took this example and said, so there are some megatrends when you look at the automotive industry, and this has an effect on other industry also. The chemical industry started with globalization nearly at the same time. And the IT industry, my industry, when I worked for different companies, so in the 80s, 90s, a little bit later, the automotive industry in the 2030s. And this was what John Nesbitt analyzed and published. So now coming to that movie, I skip out, because then it's better that again, my control question.
Clear, Prof.
It works. Okay.
It works, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So I see 8 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes. We have a look on that movie, and then I collect again the most important things.
The world is becoming more and more interconnected. Never before in human history has there existed such an intense relationship between international trade, communication, and politics. The term globalization is all around us, sometimes as an opportunity, sometimes as a new challenge. But what exactly does globalization mean, and what are its ramifications? Even though the term globalization is frequently used, it is not easy to define. One thing is clear. In today's world, economic, environmental, social, and political issues and problems are no longer limited to the national level because the world has become so interdependent. Reasonable governance can only be realized within broader groups of stakeholders. For example, state confederations such as the European Union, regional economic organizations like the OECD, or the whole world. Today, modern communication technology and mass media like radio, TV, phones, or internet are global standard. This means that information can be distributed worldwide in real time at affordable prices. For instance, the average price of a telephone call from New York to London has decreased by 99% since 1930. International TV broadcasters deliver information, opinions, and cultural products to the most remote areas. The cost for transportation of products and persons dropped by 65% since 1930, due to low fuel prices and the development of new means of transportation, in particular container shipping. Air freight costs have dropped even more, 88%. The freight charges for a ton of coffee delivered from Asia to Europe only accounts for 1% of its price. Such developments are the result of technological advancements, but there are some aspects which were introduced purposefully as well. Since the 1980s, the richer, more industrialized countries worked toward removing trade barriers, such as tariffs, import quotas, and bans worldwide. Thus, new technologies, decreasing transportation costs, and the liberalization of international trade has made it possible and profitable for major companies to produce and sell worldwide. Let's take a glance at the three main areas of globalization. The economic sphere is of particular importance. It is a major catalyst for globalization and is, at the same time, the most affected area. International exports have increased 30-fold in the last 60 years. The foreign direct investment of companies and governments has increased substantially. It's risen from $13 billion per year in 1970 to more than $1.8 trillion today. Many companies are searching for new markets and opportunities for cheap production in countries with low wages and soft environmental regulations. The number of such multinational corporations rose from 7,000 to 65,000 since the 1990s. Similar to the world economy, international politics is also more interdependent today. Most important policy issues, like climate change, the financial crisis, or terrorism, do not care about borders. Such problems cannot be solved by a single state alone. Politics tries to react by attempting to make decisions in broader groups of countries, like the EU, the G20, or even the United Nations. At the same time, there are more and more international pressure groups which do not belong to a particular state. These so-called non-governmental organizations, or NGOs, are able to exert influence in politics related to their field of work. Examples include Greenpeace, Amnesty International, or ATTAC. A global public forum evolves through the previously mentioned new possibilities of communication. NGOs use this in order to influence politics. International political problems and the emergence of new global actors like NGOs and multinational corporations lead to a decrease of the political latitude of single states, especially of small states. The influence of globalization can be observed in our culture as well. One aspect is often referred to as McWorld. The term describes how Western culture, especially popular culture, becomes dominant and destroys cultural diversity. The global distribution of Western music, news, products, and even the English language promotes this effect. To counter globalization, we can also see backlash. For example, people are increasingly returning to local and regional cultural customs. Globalization is a very complex development. Some countries benefit more, others benefit less. Newly industrialized countries like Taiwan and South Korea, as well as the rapidly developing India, Brazil, and China, gain considerable advantage from their integration into the world economy. They can build up their factories with foreign direct investment and infrastructure and sell their products internationally. Due to the low wages in these countries, these products are very competitive on the world market. China represents a perfect example of how the broader population can benefit too. Its fast economic growth has enabled 500 million Chinese to leave extreme poverty. On the other hand, there are whole regions who are suffering more than they are benefiting from globalization. This is particularly true for most sub-Saharan African countries. Such countries are not prepared sufficiently for tightened international competition. The cheap products produced by industrial and newly industrialized countries flood the local markets and destroy local productive facilities. Moreover, these countries are not attractive for foreign investors. Thus, they cannot walk the same road as the newly industrialized countries. Globalization is both a threat and an opportunity for industrialized countries. On the one hand, they can acquire new markets for their industrial goods. On the other hand, they are facing the competition of newly industrialized countries that can produce at lower costs. Specifically, the production of simple goods is no longer profitable, and very few